Hello, BookTube. I don't want it to start to appear that I, myself, am the aggressor in the ongoing threat of the OGBG, the Old Geezers Book Group book wars. Recently, it has seemed that those wars were threatening to resume, and I'm as worried about that as anybody, since your TBRs will be the casualties, but I haven't wanted it to seem like I, myself, am the aggressor. And yet, this is my third book haul in a row. 3 days in a row. I will try to make peace overtures after this. But I have an old friend who runs a church in Boston, and in happier days, he used to routinely have book sales, jumble sales of all kinds in the basement of the church, but large amounts of books, and got his parishioners into the habit of delivering boxes of books to him at any time. He became the place where they would drop off their boxes of unwanted books of all kinds. His church is rather ideally located to become a crossroads, not only for Boston's very small and dwindling, but still in existence, still extant, bookish community, extreme bookish professional community, adjunct literature professors and other utterly wretched creatures who are nevertheless on the galley lists of all the major academic presses, and also of Boston's also extant Brahmin population, Boston's extremely plutocratic blue blood population of people who have more money than God. His church is ideally located to be a crossroads for both those specimens. And as luck would have it, I have extensive inroads into both those groups of people. And he mentioned to me, he emailed me the other day, that although the book sales have stopped, because like so many people in the church business, as he says, his congregation is very old, and he doesn't want to risk it. So although the book sales themselves have stopped, the donations have not stopped. The boxes show up. He says they show up on my doorstep at midnight, like people are afraid, like they're dropping off an unwanted baby or something. And he emailed me and said, I redistribute these a lot. I do a lot of redistribution for them. We are together. I have helped him to work out channels for instance, prisons and stuff like that, places like that, orphanages where books can go that are much needed and much appreciated. The rules for such places can be pretty strict, unnecessarily strict, but nevertheless, it still leaves an excess. And he emailed me and said, if your errands are taking you in this general direction, I have a few boxes of books I'd like you to look through before I get rid of them. And my errands did take me in that direction, so I went. Even though I have done a book haul the last 2 consecutive days, I went anyway. Because it's the end of the year, and what I don't want, I can get rid of. And I wanted to see what would be in those boxes. I knew already that there would be a large percentage of things that I had already owned at one point or another, that I've certainly already read or heard about. And I wasn't, since they were all free, I just had to fill a backpack. I wasn't against taking some of those in, but also I was interested in the 1 or 2 gems, the things that I had never seen before, the things that I might be interested in. And as a result, I have a gigantic stack of books that I want to show. Utterly ridiculous. We'll start off with a bunch of smaller books, mass market paperbacks, and one hardcover that is still mass market size. And the first one is a romance novel. This is by Laura Moore, who's not Laurie Moore. I don't know that I've ever read anything by Laura Moore, although the plot for this book sounds very familiar. This is by Laura Moore, and it's called Remember Me. It is a Rosewood Ranch novel. And it has Paul Marin on the cover. A romance novel cover model stalwart, who's always good for a glance. And this is a story about a hard luck, hard scrabble, from nothing man who has a gift with horses, for breaking them, for talking with them, for calming them down. And he works on a horse ranch that is owned by the family of a young woman who wants nothing more than to move on to more glamorous pursuits, to become a supermodel. Only in the course of the novel, tragedy strikes her and she has to go back home. It's a very familiar gimmick for romance novels. She has to go back home, And it turns out that the survival of the ranch now depends on the skills this man has. And as luck would have it, when she was back on the ranch the first time, he broke her heart. And now, this will be a classic romance novel gimmick where they vie and cross swords and disagree with each other, only to realize that the love they originally felt for each other is still very much there, can very much be rekindled. This is from 2010 and is a sequel to Believe in Me, a novel called Believe in Me that I also likewise vaguely remember. I may have already read these things, but I'm all for reading them again. Now, a lot of these, I mean, this whole book haul will be mostly rereads, except for a couple of items that I don't believe I've ever had. This next one is a classic. I got, yesterday I got A Sailor's Odyssey, which was the utterly wonderful historical document memoir of a fighting admiral during World War II. And as such, A Sailor's Odyssey forms a kind of takes a kind of place in nautical literature, and although it's not, in nautical literature, there are some elements, some items that are really popular, others that are much less well known. The next book is one that is extremely well known. It's been reprinted a million times, and the only reason I got it today is because I love this particular reprint, and this is Sailing Alone Around the World by Captain Joshua Slocum, who was the first person ever to sail alone around the world. And this is, you may have seen some of these on Mark Richardson's channel. These are Shambhala classics, these gorgeous little hardcovers. They have the cloth dust jacket, and a lot of them have illustrations. This one does. This is full of the black and white illustrations. I've read Slocum's book a million times. This and Gypsy Moth Sails the World and Kon-Tiki. And there is a category of nautical books that's in a different realm of popularity than, for instance, A Sailor's Odyssey. There's a category of these things that no little book shelf in a berth on a sailing vessel will be without, and this is one of those things. Slocum is the dream come true of every amateur mariner in the world, because he not only did something that was totally unprecedented, but also wrote an immortal classic about it, and then had the good grace to vanish at sea. That's how he vanished at sea. We don't know what happened to Joshua Slocum, which is, the added chef's kiss to the whole nautical adventure thing. And I think I saw Mark Richardson hold up this Shambhala classic. He has a few of these things. I love them. They're just a classy way to do this. And I think at the time, if it was his channel where I saw it, and where else would it have been, honestly speaking? Either that or we mentioned it in passing in some vacation, some visit. Even then, I think I remember noting that it's been a long time since I reread this book. And it shouldn't ever be. I've spent an enormous amount of time on Earth's water instead of on Earth land. An enormous amount of time out on the open ocean. Not just rivers and lakes, but out on the open ocean. An enormous amount, often in wind-driven sailing vessels. So I have read this book many times with a nod, and also a little bit of a wince. Once you reach a certain age and you read seagoing memoirs like this, you wince a little, because it's a hard existence. Your memories are only fond of it, but they're nevertheless memories of deprivation. So I was going to be fun to read through this. The next one would be a reread. Definitely, I would really ideally like it to be a buddy read. A buddy read along in 2021. I'd like to set up a whole imaginary roster of those and do a buddy read of this. Of course, an ideal buddy read along for 2021 with Mark Richardson would be the Aubrey and Matra novels, one at a time. How much fun that would be! But also, I would love to find somebody to do this, and that is A Song of Ice and Fire. This is the mass market paperback of A Game of Thrones, the first book in the series. The mass market paperback retains this gorgeous cover artwork minus the dire wolf. The full wraparound cover of this that you get, for instance, on the trade paperback, has the dire wolf right over here. But nevertheless, I had trade paperbacks of these. The first 3 books in this series were done with this gorgeous cover artwork. Is this Michael Whelan? Should I Should I know that? Maps by James Sinclair. Heraldic Crests by Virginia Norrie. Okay, but what about the cover art? Stephen Ewell. Okay, don't know him from Adam. But the first 3 volumes of in this series had gorgeous cover artwork like this, and then the publisher decided, one reason or another, maybe Stephen Ewell made trouble, or maybe they made trouble for him, to dispense with it. And after that, the Song of Ice and Fire covers in America have been legendarily ugly. Just awful. It's utterly boring. I had the first 3 trade paperbacks of these with this artwork, and as soon as I saw this in the box of discards, I realized that I don't have those trade paperbacks anymore, and I don't mind reading this in a mass market at all. I'm not sure that I want all of the others, but with the first one, to rekindle the idea of all the potentialities of this series, absolutely. Then this next one is an old Bantam classic. There's a little row here of Bantam classics that I have up there that it's not by any means that I don't have these books. I have electronic copies of these, and because they're classic reprints, the electronic copies are often free. I have Penguin Classics of these things, but there's a part of me that really loves these old Bantam classics. And I have therefore a slew of them, and I found one today that was one of my all-time favorites. It's actually one of the Bantam classics that I had in this format that I preferred to any other, and that is the short stories of Mark Twain. It was lovely. There's a design that Bantam did that looks like this, and they did a whole bunch of them, and I'm a big fan. So I got this. I don't actually, aside from electronic copies, I don't actually have any collection of the collected short stories of Mark Twain other than this. Now, I used to have a big volume, and I have the running press unedited, unabridged Mark Twain, but the volume that I have doesn't concentrate just on short stories. So this is actually a good addition to the library. I will reinforce it and put it up on that shelf with the other Bantam classics. Then this next one was a UK mass market, I think from Faber. It's got to be Faber. Of a book that I have read before and I've really liked it. I just don't have it, and I've never one to resist UK paperbacks, trade paperback or mass market at all. And this is Writing Home by National Treasure Alan Bennett. This is just a bunch of miscellaneous writings. I love his miscellaneous writings. I try to repress a more than giggle at his annual journal. I think the London Review of Books does his annual journal. It's been getting more and more morbid as each year goes by. So those journals have gone from peppy joie de vie to another friend of mine dropped off the twig. And this will be just a large dose of that. But as a little mass market that doesn't take up much space on the shelf, that doesn't take up much storage, that isn't much work, I will, reinforce this and read it. It's actually a perfect occasional dip-in bedside book. Because a book like this you don't want to read from start to finish. That would be a little bit much. Those were the mass markets of this little thing. A whole bunch of these little paperbacks. But then I found a bunch of bigger stuff as well. And the first one of those is one of those gems, one of those finds of the day. Something that I'm not exhaustively familiar with, something that I have never owned, and that I am certainly going to enjoy. And it is this. This must be the 1950s. What is the date on this thing? Oh, good Lord. Oh, no. 1960s. This is from the 1960s. This is a Saturday Evening Post anthology of sea stories. But again, this is just gorgeous. Just like a Seaman's Odyssey and Away All Boats and a bunch of nautical stuff that we've seen. Just this gorgeous cover artwork that pretty much sold me on it as it is. But this is again from the heyday of the Saturday Evening Post, which has no heyday now. It's totally gone from the public consciousness now. But for 2 generations, it was one of the most influential and most read, the highest circulation periodicals in America. And they paid top dollar for their nonfiction and for their fiction. And they published thousands and thousands of little bits on sea literature of one kind or another. And here the editor, Day Edgar, goes through that vast body of work and gives us an anthology that has, who do we have here? I know you're going to be curious. So who do we have here? The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms by Ray Bradbury. We have Don Waters, Robert Nathan, C.S. Forster has a short story here, Hornblower and the Man Who Felt Queer. Clay Blair, Charles Rawlings, Tom Yates, another Charles Rawlings. Anybody else that see the thing I love about there's a novella by C.S. Forster, Dr. Blank's First Command. But the main thing I like about this is that it's full of authors that I do not readily come to mind, and that I'm definitely going to want to make their acquaintances again. I probably read some of these stories in either other anthologies or in, God forbid, the Saturday Evening Post itself. But having them in an anthology like this, attractive anthology like this, just fine by me. And another thing, like Writing Home and like the complete stories of Mark Twain, also good for dipping in and out instead of just serially reading. Then this next one is a bit of a pandemic buy, believe it or not. This is by Neil Ferguson, who has made, who has grabbed headlines during the 2020 year of plague for his projections of death and infection, and he's been everywhere on every talk show. He's doubtless going to write a big book on the subject that'll probably appear in 2021. But this is the big book that everybody knows him for. This is the War of the World, where he takes on, it's a big Penguin trade paperback. I've had this on and off many times. I might still have a copy now, but when I saw it in the box, I had to grab it. Just on the off chance that I don't. This is his big, intentionally incendiary reinterpretation of the causes and realities of war, especially World Wars I and II. I read this when it first came out and objected to something on every page. And not just because, I don't think you have sufficient documentary evidence to back that up, but because, I think you're showboating. I think you know you don't have documentary evidence and you're writing this anyway, just to make trouble, just to get headlines, just to make sure that every literary journal in the world hauls its resident tame academic historian out of mothballs just to knock this thing around the park, which is the best advertising money can't buy. It's been a while since I read it, even in trade paperback, so I will give it another try and see if maybe that is too harsh an assessment. I will see, because much as a showboat as this guy is, I've never been able to quite just dismiss him as a parvenu. I've never been quite able to do that. There's a first-rate brain, I think, lurking around in here. I think I reviewed his last book, The Tower and the Square. I believe I did that for the Boston Globe or Christian Science Monitor. I'll have to remember to look and see. I believe I reviewed his last one, a weirdly formless book that never really got down to cases. I think probably because it didn't want to be contradicted. This book has no fear like that. This is wide open for the possibility of contradiction. Then this next one is from 2013. I certainly got an advance copy of this book. This is an advance copy from Basic Books. This is a review copy. It's not mine. It doesn't have my mark on it, so it's not mine. It had to come to that box from somebody else, not me. I may have even read this, but I'm pretty sure I've never reviewed it. I don't want to state that too categorically, since yesterday I said that Richard Slotkin's book, The Road to Antietam, looks fairly entertaining. Can't wait to get to it. Sure, I haven't read it anymore. Not only read it, but I reviewed it. Very bad. So I don't want to be categorical about this. I may have reviewed this. This is by Nicola Phillips, and it's The Profligate Son. And it's, you can see there, this is an advance copy, like the kind that we get in the mail. And or used to get in the mail. And this is a story about a Georgian wastrel, not a noble-born boy, but just the son of a success in industry, who just decided to spend money that wasn't his own, like it was going out of style, and came to ruined his family, and came to ruin himself. Debtor's prison eventually. And this is just Nicola Phillips is going through the archives and digging out the details of that story and then telling it with a lot of energy. And I remember this book when it came out. I remember the press that it got, and I remember thinking approvingly that this kind of thing could be done for almost anybody. My idea has always been to do this for everyone who sat for a John Singer Sargent portrait. Write a book like this about each one of them. And call the series, do them each at 150 pages, and call the series the Singer Portraits. But you could do this for almost anybody in the age of literacy. So in the last post-Enlightenment, there are documents that exist in sufficient number to do this kind of job for almost anybody. And if you do it with energy, the stories are always going to be interesting, because everybody's story is interesting. Except Brian at Bookish. I don't think nobody's going to be tempted to search the archives for him. Anyway, this next one is one of the only hardcovers that I got. I got hardly any hardcovers, just a handful of them. And this is an example, another example of something that I did not know about. This is from 2009, and it is Our Life in Gardens by Joe Eck and Wayne Winterowd. Our Life in Gardens, which has spot illustrations for each chapter. It's the third book we've written together, though separately we've written others. But to say written separately makes no sense, for when two lives have been bent for so many years, one on one central enterprise, in this case gardening, there really is no such thing as separately. With these words, the renowned garden designers Joe Eck and Wayne Winterowd begin their entertaining, fascinating, and unexpectedly moving book about life and the life and garden they share. The book contains much sound information about the cultivation of plants and their value in the landscape, and invaluable advice about the author's area of expertise, garden design. And one of the most persistent side effects of my flirtation over the last 4 years with starting a garden of my own has been a love of gardening books. It was probably predictable. I never actually did start a garden of my own. I never actually have done that because, as the woman put it in the New Yorker cartoon, it involves stooping. But in the meantime, while I have hemmed and hawed about it, I have also started reading lots and lots of books on gardening and loved it. I've absolutely loved it. Maybe that will be the legacy of me wanting to start a garden, will be that I never actually start a garden, but I read about it. I read more about it. It was free, and it's right up that alley. I'll be happy to give it a read through. Then we're going to finish up with 3 books that I have read, and these will all be rereads. I don't know how urgent they will be, but I will definitely get to them at one point or another. This first one that we'll talk about is something that I have read many times. I don't think I'm blurbed on the paperback. Am I blurbed in the... This is the paperback release, Oxford University Press. No, okay, but this is Daniel Walker Howe. This is What Hath God Wrought in a trade paperback. This is also part of the Oxford History of the United States. Just like we saw Empire of Liberty by Gordon Wood. This is the subsequent volume, not necessarily in publication order, but in terms of coverage. This takes us from the aftermath of the War of 1812 right up to the doorstep of the American Civil War. And I reviewed this book at great length, 2,500 words, I believe, for Open Letters Monthly. If I remember, I will try to find that review. I really enjoyed that review. I really liked how it came out. And I enjoyed the book. A little stodgy at times, but very much worth having. And I don't think I have this. I have encountered it many times. I have found a couple of copies at library sales, hardcover copies, and got them. And I duly get rid of them. I either resell them, I sell them to the Brattle, or I get, more often, mail them out to somebody who's looking for a big volume of history that's approachable and readable on a relatively formless time in American history, you know? The American Revolution has 80 million books. The War of 1812 is well represented in books. Andrew Jackson is well represented in books. John Quincy Adams. Andrew Jackson and John Quincy Adams are the 2 stars, the pole stars of this book. They're well represented on their own. And of course, the American Civil War is extremely well represented in books. But that period in between, not so much. And this does a really good job of that. So since it was free, and on the chance that I don't currently have a copy, I grabbed it. Then we have the last hardcover. This is something that I have in ebook form, and I saw the hardcover and grabbed it just because. But again, I'm going to have to reckon with the fact. Oh, hello, baby. Do you want to see your fans? Huh? Ooh. I have this in hardcover and paperback. Don't I? Hi, baby. How you doing? There's no direct sunlight today. It's heavily cloudy. And that is causing the bean to be a little bit on the subdued side. She likes direct sunlight. I think she may be from Krypton. How you doing, baby? How you doing? Oh. several people have commented on. I have lots of new people watching the channel, lots and lots of new people, and they are all impressed by Frida because she is adorable. But several of those people were commenting in emails, sending me emails. I leave my email on every video. Feel free to email me about anything that crosses your pretty little mind. But several people were emailing saying, "We love your dog. How come she's not in this latest video?" And I've had to tell people what I guess is worth commenting, although it strikes me as so normal that it, like breathing, you just don't think to mention it, which is that Frida is my friend, not my servant. She's in videos when she wants to be. Not at any other time. I'm not going to tell her to be in a video, for Pete's sake. So, you know, she shows up, but she doesn't always show up. What you doing? Huh? Oh. I think she wants to go OUT. She wants to go for a little walk. Well, we're almost done, so it's just as well. The point that I was trying to make before being interrupted is that I need in 2021 to come to some sort of systematic decision about what I'm going to do about ebooks. 2020 was the year that I fell wholeheartedly in love with reading ebooks, and I didn't so much fall as I was pushed, because my profession, for those of you who are new to the channel, is I'm a professional book reviewer. A professional book critic. And the form that has taken for 50 years has been that it was a form that will be well familiar to old-time viewers of this channel, which is that I get 10 books in the mail every day, either floppy review copies like Fascinate Son, or finished hardcovers. Sometimes a whole mail tub full, sometimes 2 mail tubs full of review copies. You become known to publishers. They see that you've reviewed 10 of their books in, newspapers around the country, and they start to send you books. And I would organize those things by release date and by month, and then I had a whole bookcase for them that I would just regularly update. But 2020's pandemic changed that completely. Suddenly there was nobody in the warehouses, there was nobody in the publishing houses. They were all at home. They were working from home. And suddenly the idea of getting all of those advanced copies and then all of those finished copies collapsed like a house of cards. And as a result, I've got barely a trickle in 2020. And the handful of booktubers who are situated like me, where they are on publishers' list, where they are active reviewers, where they are publishers like them and want to get them the latest stuff, are in the same boat. And as a result, but of course the one thing that wasn't affected by that at all was e-copies of books. It's like many publishing and reviewing friends of mine have told me over the course of 2020. Imagine if this had happened 15 years ago, when there were no ebooks, when there were no e-review copies of anything. But it didn't. And as a result, there was a technology that was just sitting there, ready to take over for all of those advanced copies. And it did. And I already had many iPads and Amazon Kindles and Barnes & Noble Nooks. I had a plethora of smart touchscreen color reading devices. So the switch was easy for me. I already loved ebooks even before then, but I largely love them for other things. Suddenly now I'm using these things as a profession and couldn't be happier about it. And in addition to that, I put out the call, and of course that call is extant. That call is still around. You can definitely send me EPUB and PDF copies of any books in your own electronic libraries. I put out a call at the beginning of 2020, and several of you have been very generous sending me ebooks of all kinds, not just new stuff, but old stuff as well. And I know that I have an e-copy of, for instance, this book, The Praise Singer by Mary Renault. I'm pretty sure I have all of Mary Renault in ebooks. This is a story of a character named Simonides, who is in ancient Greece, and he takes up a profession that was popular and very common in ancient Greece, but is absolutely gone now, which was the epic singer, the epic bard, the person who would have sung the Iliad at a noble gathering or at a big dinner party. That profession has gone away, but it once had its own rules, its own guilds, its own precepts of every kind. And Mary Renault digs into that world and dramatizes it, gives it a human face by putting a novel around it. I love this book, of course. I love almost all of Mary Renault's novels. And I have the ebook of it. So I'm going to need to figure out what I want to do about that. Obviously, it would be completely wasteful, wouldn't it? Or maybe not, to have physical printed copies of books that I love, if I also have e-copies of them, I mean, some of you must be in the same position. What are you going to do about that? I don't know for sure. I'm not going to make a systematic conclusion on it this late in the year. That will be a 2021 decision, but I got this anyway because I don't have a hardcover copy of it. And then the last thing that we'll deal with, a big fat biography. I mentioned it just the other day that I didn't have a copy of this. Just the other day I did. It's a classic. It's one of the great biographies that's ever been written, and I didn't have a copy of it at the time. And at the time, both when I said that on video and when I realized before that I didn't have a copy, my first thought was the Brattle will provide. Those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, the Brattle is a used bookstop here in Boston, and they have such a high turnover of stuff that I've routinely fallen into the habit over the last 50 years of saying the Brattle will provide. If something comes up in my reading or in my daily life, and I'm thinking, oh, I don't have that book and I want it, all I have to do is wait, usually not long at all, before the Brattle will provide. Well, in this case, it wasn't the Brattle. It was just a box of books on Beacon Hill. But nevertheless, it's The Power Broker by Robert Caro. Robert Caro's great biography of Robert Moses, and also his great look at Robert Moses' time, is not just a Moses biography. It's also his time. And it's terrific. It's blood-boilingly infuriating when you're reading it, especially if your life has been touched by the urban desecrations that Robert Moses provoked up and down the eastern seacoast. I wrote a little bit about Moses. I could have written just recently. I did, I think, for the Vineyard Gazette. I could have written a lot more, and a lot of it is just brought to a boil by this book, which is a classic biography, just a great work of biography. Evoking the man, his controversies, and his time. So I was happy to find it, especially since it was free as it would have been at the Brattle. So now I have a copy of this. Really, no biography wall. I have a bit of a biography wall. No biography wall is complete without this. So I got it. And that is it. That is my third consecutive book haul. So now I'm worried, not only am I not responding to the OGBG book wars, but that I may be instigating a new round. I don't want to do that. So maybe I won't have a book haul tomorrow. It's possible that I won't have a book haul tomorrow. But in the meantime, we'll attempt a Steve Pyramid here. We have The Power Broker, a classic. We have What Hath God Wrought in the Oxford History of America, History of the United States. We have The Profligate Son by Nicola Phillips, who I believe I've reviewed with a few other books. I don't know that I've ever reviewed this one, but I think I've reviewed Nicola Phillips before. We have Our Life in Gardens by two professional garden designers. We have The Praise Singer by Mary Renault. We have the collection of Saturday Evening Post sea stories. I admit probably this will be the first one that gets my attention. Then we have The War of the World by Neil Ferguson, his argument-starting reassessment of World Wars I and II. We have Sailing Alone Around the World by Joshua Slocum in this Shambhala mass market. We have Remember Me by Laura Moore, Friends to Enemies romance. We have A Game of Thrones by George R. R. Martin in mass market paperback. We have Writing Home by Alan Bennett in a UK mass market. And we have The Complete Stories of Mark Twain in this old Bantam classic that I love so much. So there you go. A non-Brattle book haul, but nevertheless, many more additions to my collection, and also more possibilities for this shelf, that blank shelf right there, which is already starting to fill up with books that may or may not be keepers in 2021. We shall see. I also, you see over my shoulder there, something that wasn't there yesterday, a tiny little painting of a lilac blossom. I have a lilac tree here that I love, and I boosted that as well. I boosted that as well from my friend's church. It was in a box of miscellaneous stuff, and it was just going to be thrown away, and it fits perfectly underneath my poster from the wind and willows. So I grabbed it and put it right there. So sue me. So I'm not going to start a painting war in the OGBG. So there you go. I've got a bunch of books to root through and inventory and probably revisit. I will probably almost involuntarily read some stories from that post collection. But anyway, I'm going to wrap this up before it gets any hideously longer, and I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.